Wyoming Territory, early spring of 1878. The wind dragged over the high plains like a whip across raw skin. Quinn Zeller shifted in his saddle and narrowed his eyes at the wide stretch of land ahead. His horse's ears twitched. The trail was quiet until it was not. Screaming, he kicked his boots into the horse's sides and galloped over the rise. Smoke curled from the edge of the pine grove, and a wagon lay tipped on its side in the grass, one wheel still spinning. A woman crouched behind the wreck, rifle clutched against her shoulder. Her dress was torn at one sleeve, face streaked with soot. Behind her, two children huddled, their cheeks pressed to the ground. Quinn dismounted before his boots hit earth. "Ma'am," he called out, hands raised, voice steady. "I am not here to hurt you." The woman's rifle trembled, but she did not lower it. "Please," he said, stepping closer. "I heard the screaming. I came to help." The woman's eyes flicked toward the children, then back to him. Slowly, she lowered the rifle. "They killed my husband," she said, voice hoarse. "Ambushed us, took the horses, left us for dead." Quinn exhaled, jaw tight. "Are you hurt?" "No, just smoke." The wagon caught fire. "Children are all right, for now." He walked forward carefully, crouched beside them. The children, two girls, looked up at him with wide, tear-crusted eyes. "I am Quinn Zeller," he said gently. "What are your names?" The woman pressed her hand to her chest like she had to remember who she was. Henley Rosewater. These are my nieces, May and Miriam. My sister passed last winter. I was raising them with my husband." Quinn nodded, looking at the girls again. "You are safe now, I promise." Henley blinked, and something in her shoulders eased. Just a little. They buried her husband near the creek, under a cottonwood tree. The girls placed wildflowers on the mound without quite understanding what it meant. That night, Quinn built a fire and cooked beans from his saddlebag. Henley sat across from him, arms wrapped around her knees. The flames caught the light on her face, and he saw then what others must have whispered about. Scars. Thin, curved lines that stretched across her jaw, her cheek, down the side of her neck. Some old, some not so old. They were the kind that spoke of fire and fight, not illness. They told stories no one had asked her to tell. "You are staring," she said. Quinn looked away. "Sorry." "Do not be," Henley said. "They do not itch anymore. I just forget they are there until someone stares. I was not staring because they are ugly." She looked at him then, really looked. No, he said simply. The girls fell asleep curled up beside Henley, and he took first watch. The night was cold, but quiet. In the dark, he heard her whisper. "They said I was too scarred to marry. After the fire. The one that took my home when I was 17. I proved them wrong." Quinn turned toward her. "You did." She met his eyes. "Now they will say it again." "No," he said. "They will not." She held his gaze a moment longer, then lay back beside the girls. In the morning, he helped them gather what supplies had survived the flames. There was no going back east. Henley had no family left to return to. When he asked where they were headed before the attack, she said, "North. Land near Buffalo. My husband had a deed waiting." Quinn nodded. "I will get you there." Henley looked at him from beneath wind-tangled hair. "Why?" "Because I can." That was true, but it was not the whole truth. They rode double on his horse for 2 days, camping in open fields, riverbanks, and once inside an old trapper's cabin that smelled of dust and mouse droppings. May asked him if he was a real cowboy. "I reckon I am," he said, pulling a face that made her giggle. "Do cowboys marry?" "Some do. Will you?" He glanced at Henley, who was brushing Miriam's hair with her fingers. "Maybe," he said, "if I find someone worth staying for." Henley looked up, and their eyes caught. The third night it rained. They took shelter beneath a rock overhang. Henley's dress was soaked through, and Quinn turned his back while she changed into dry clothes. When she called his name softly, he turned around and saw her there, hair dripping, face bare, scars visible, and eyes clear. "You do not flinch when you look at me." "No, why?" "Because you are not something to flinch from." She stepped toward him. "You are too kind." "I am not kind. I am just not blind." Henley blinked fast. She looked down, then back at him. "Do you know, I used to think I would never be touched again unless someone pitied me." "I do not pity you," he said. "I know." She reached for his hand. "You are warm," she whispered. "So are you." The fourth day, they reached the edge of Buffalo. Quinn rode into town, paid a man to take him to the land office, and helped Henley find the deed her husband had planned to claim. The land was real, a small stretch just east of the Bighorn Mountains. A creek ran through it, and a broken-down cabin stood like a ghost. But it was theirs. He helped them settle there. He chopped wood, fixed the door, patched the roof. Henley insisted on cooking him meals, even if all she had were beans and flour and dried apples. May and Miriam followed him everywhere. At night he slept in the barn. But his thoughts stayed with the woman in the house. The way she moved, her laughter, rare but bright. The way she never asked him to stay, but never wanted him to leave. One evening she came to the barn. She had flour on her cheek. "I made bread," she said. "It is lumpy. I like lumpy." She handed him a piece. He took a bite and smiled. "You have been here 10 days, Henley said. "I know. Do you plan to leave?" "I do not know." "Why?" "Because I have not wanted to leave." She stepped closer. May asked again if cowboys marry. Quinn chuckled. "She is persistent." "She is." "I told her I did not know." Henley reached out and touched his chest. Her fingers trembled. "I would not mind if you stayed," she said. "I was hoping you would say that," he said. Then he bent and kissed her. It was not rushed. It was not desperate. It was quiet, slow, and real. She exhaled against his mouth, and he caught her in his arms. Henley pulled back just enough to look at him. "You see me. All of me." "Yes," he said. "And I like every part." She kissed him again, and this time she did not hold back. The morning after the kiss, the wind shifted. Not in the sky, but between them. Quinn rose early, as always. The barn had gone cold in the night, and his breath came out in soft clouds. He saddled his horse not to leave, but to ride the perimeter of the homestead, checking the creek bank where the thaw was running fast and strong. The cabin's stovepipe puffed gray smoke, and he caught the faint clang of Henley's pot against the hearthstone as he rode past. When he returned, Henley was outside stacking kindling beneath the lean-to. Her sleeves were rolled, and her hands were red from the cold. May and Miriam were out of sight, likely still inside with a slate or their stitching lessons. "You don't have to do that," Quinn said as he stepped down from the saddle. "I do," Henley replied, not meeting his eyes. "It's my place now. I want it to look like one." He nodded, grounding himself in the silence. "Creek's rising. Might take the footbridge if we don't shore it up." Henley paused, straightened. "There was a bridge?" "Used to be," he said. "Just planks lashed over 2 beams. It's halfway gone now. Then we'll build a better one." The way she said "we" settled something in him. That afternoon they worked side by side. She held the boards in place while he hammered, her breath sharp in the air. When a nail bent, she laughed an unguarded sound that surprised them both. "I haven't done this sort of work before," she said. "You're doing it now," he said. Quinn didn't say what he was thinking, that she looked more herself when her hands were dirty and her sleeves were rolled than she ever had in the neat dresses she'd worn when he first met her. Later, over stew that tasted mostly of onions and salt pork, Henley spoke without lifting her eyes. There's a neighbor a few miles east. His wife dropped by once, before the deed was signed. She said we'd be welcome at church. That was before everything. Quinn didn't rush her. Henley set down her spoon. I'm not sure I want to go. You don't have to, he said. I know. Her eyes lifted. But the girls might need it. Something steady. Something that tells them they belong to more than just me. He considered that. Then I'll take you, if that's what you want. She reached across the table, her fingers brushing his. I want to be seen beside someone who knows what he's choosing. I do know, he said. That night he stayed in the barn again, but he didn't sleep much. The wind rattled the rafters, and the scent of pine pitch clung to his shirt. In the dark, he remembered his mother's hands, how they used to braid his sister's hair before church, how they'd blistered after hog butchering days. He'd always thought the kind of life he wanted would be far from all that. But now he wasn't so sure. He rose before dawn and started digging a trench behind the cabin where the rain had begun to pool. Henley joined him without a word, handing him the spade when his arms tired. By midday, the sun broke through. The girls ran barefoot in the grass, their laughter echoing off the trees. Quinn leaned against the porch rail, watching them. Henley stood beside him, wiping her hands with a rag. I thought they'd be quiet forever, she said. After what happened, I didn't know children could come back from something like that. They don't, not all the way, he said. But they find places to tuck the hurt. Little corners they only look at when they have to. Henley looked at him, her face serious. And you? Do you have those corners? He hesitated. I buried a brother I never got to fight beside. Killed in Virginia. I was still driving cattle in Kansas. I used to think I'd never forgive myself for not enlisting when he did. Henley's hand found his. Not demanding, not asking for anything. Just holding. You did what you could, she said. So did you. They didn't speak again for a while. The girls were climbing a fallen tree, playing some game only they understood. Henley broke the silence first. I want a garden. Not a big one. Just enough for beans, maybe squash. You'll need fencing, he said. Rabbits'll eat you out of house and home otherwise. Then you'll help me build it? I'll help you build anything, he said. She turned to him then, and for the first time, he saw a softness in her expression that hadn't been there before. Not just relief, not just gratitude. Something settled. I keep waiting for this to feel like borrowing, she said. But it doesn't. It feels like it's ours already. It is, Quinn said. If you want it to be. She nodded. I think I do. And for the first time in years, Quinn felt like he'd stopped somewhere worth staying. The first frost came early that year, silvering the grasses behind the cabin and stiffening the earth beneath the porch steps before dawn. Henley stepped outside wrapped in her husband's old wool coat, the hem dragging behind her, and watched the sun burn through the low mist. Quinn was already in the pasture mending a loose rail where the neighbor's mule had tested the fence line. She walked to him with a tin cup of coffee, both hands wrapped around the warmth of it. You'll need thicker gloves, she said, setting the cup on the post. I've got calluses enough to keep me warm, Quinn replied. But I wouldn't turn down a second pair. Henley leaned her elbows on the top rail and looked out at the uneven stretch of land they'd worked into something close to order. The barn roof no longer sagged, and the garden beds were cleared and covered. A stack of firewood stood head high against the north wall of the cabin. There was hunger in the land still, but not the kind that came from lack. You know, she said, I used to think the quiet would undo me. Too many years in a town? Quinn asked. She shook her head slowly. Too many years in my own company. After the fire, folks stopped asking me things that weren't about what I'd lost. Somewhere in there, I stopped answering. He didn't speak right away, driving a nail through the rail with 3 clean strikes. Henley watched his hands. I don't remember the last time I told someone what I hoped for. Quinn set the hammer down. You could start now. She turned her face toward his, eyes steady. I want to build a root cellar. I want to teach the girls how to read contracts, not just scripture. I want to dance again. Even if it's only in the kitchen with the windows shuttered. He nodded once, quiet as ever. I can help with those. Henley's voice dropped. And I want to wake up beside someone who doesn't look at me like I'm surviving. Someone who just sees me as theirs. Quinn met her eyes. Then you'll be waking up here. That evening, they brought in the last of the onions, brushing dirt from the bulbs as dusk settled. May and Miriam chased each other between the rows, their feet thudding soft against the turned earth. Henley carried the basket inside and began sorting the good from the soft. Behind her, Quinn hung his coat and watched her move with the ease of habit. You ever think about making it official? He asked. Henley didn't turn around. You mean marriage? I do. Not a lot of women get asked twice, she said, placing an onion on the shelf. And not many men ask once when the answer might come wrapped in someone else's past. Quinn stepped forward. This isn't about what came before. It's about what's here now. This life. Henley faced him then. Her hair was loose, falling behind her shoulders in uneven waves. You sure you want to do this before snow sets in? I'd marry you in a blizzard, he said. She laughed, quiet and full. You're not much for ceremony, are you? I'm here. That's ceremony enough. She reached for his hand, pressing his palm to her cheek. You'll have to ask the girls, she said. They've grown used to things being theirs. Quinn's thumb brushed her temple. They're part of this. Always will be. The next afternoon, they rode to the neighbor's homestead. Quinn wore his cleanest shirt, Henley a dress with a mended hem and a ribbon in her hair. May held a bouquet of dried sage and cornflowers. Miriam carried the Bible. The neighbor's wife, a woman named Ruth with a voice like a fiddle string, stood as witness while her husband said the words. Henley didn't flinch. She didn't falter. She looked Quinn in the eye and said yes like she'd been ready for years. They rode home in the last light, Henley tucked against Quinn's side on the horse, the girls behind them giggling over something he couldn't hear. Back at the cabin, Henley lit the lamp and set a tin plate of dried apple pie on the table. It's not much, she said, brushing flour from her sleeve. It's everything, Quinn replied. They ate in silence, the fire crackling low. Later, when the girls were asleep beneath quilts stitched by a mother they barely remembered, Henley stepped outside into the cold night and looked up at the stars. Quinn joined her, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. This land's rough, she said, but it's honest. I think I could belong here. You already do, he said. Henley looked at him, not as a woman guarding herself, but as one who had chosen her place. I never thought I'd be someone's first choice, she said softly. You've always been mine, Quinn said. She leaned into him, and the prairie wind passed over them like a benediction. By late November, the ground had hardened beneath a crust of snow, and the wind swept clean through the valley, low and constant, like it had something to say and no one left to say it to. Henley stood at the window with a length of wool in her hands, piecing together a new shawl for Miriam from leftover scraps. The girls were in the loft, pressed close under quilts with a dog-eared book between them. The cabin had taken on the hush of winter already with smoke, boiled oats, the sound of a fire settling into coals. Quinn came in carrying a bundle of fence wire looped over one shoulder, his boots leaving gray prints across the threshold. That wire's from the McCallie place, he said, setting it beside the door. They're tearing up what's left of the north pasture. Said we could take what we wanted if we hauled it ourselves. Henley folded the wool across her lap. You think they'll stay through winter? Doesn't sound like it. Too many mouths for too little land. He took off his gloves and rubbed his palms together near the stove. They've got kin near Sheridan. Said the wagon'll be ready by week's end. She nodded slowly. That's a hard thing, leaving what you started. Sometimes staying's harder. Henley didn't answer right away. She tucked the wool beside her and crossed to the basin, rinsing her hands from the soap pot she'd stirred earlier. The water was cold enough to bite. You ever think about what you'd be doing if you'd kept riding past us that day? She asked, her voice low. No, he said without hesitation. Because I didn't. She turned to him, drying her hands on her apron. But you could've. You didn't owe us anything. Quinn stepped forward until the stove's warmth touched them both. I'd been looking for something I couldn't put a name to, and then there you were with ash on your face and that old rifle like it weighed more than you. And I knew. Henley shook her head a little, though her lips curved faintly. You didn't even know my name. I knew enough. He reached for her hand, not like he was asking, just offering. She took it, resting her palm against his chest where the fire's heat still clung to his shirt. There's something I haven't told you, she said quietly. Quinn waited. I was married before the man who brought us west, she said. Back when I still lived in Illinois. It lasted less than a year. He left after the fire. Quinn's brow didn't shift. You don't owe me explanations. I know. But I wanted you to hear it from me. She looked up at him. He said I frightened him. That waking beside me was like waking in the ruins of something. Quinn pulled her closer, his hand steady on her back. You're no ruin, he said. You're the one who rebuilt. Henley breathed in once, slow and full, and rested her forehead against his shoulder. Later, when the girls were asleep and the fire had burned down to a soft hum, Henley and Quinn sat beside it, their knees touching. I saw a hawk today, Quinn said, voice hushed, perched out near the dry creek bed. One wing was dragging. Could be frostbitten, she murmured. Could be caught on something. I couldn't get close enough to tell. Henley reached for a tin of salve and set it on the table. If you find him tomorrow, bring him back. We'll see what we can do. Quinn looked at her. You always have something ready to mend things. I've had to learn, she said, when no one else would. He took her hand again, gentler this time, thumb tracing a circle into her skin. You don't have to do it alone anymore. She leaned her head against his shoulder. I know. Outside, the wind howled through the trees like a voice remembering its way home. Inside, the cabin held firm, and the warmth that passed between them needed no fire to keep. By December, snow lay thick across the land, softening the edges of fence posts and muffling every sound that wasn't wind. The cabin creaked more in the cold, and the girls had taken to reading aloud in the evenings just to fill the hush. Henley had mended every pair of socks in the house twice over, and Quinn spent longer hours in the barn, not because the chores demanded it, but because the quiet inside seemed to ask for something he couldn't name. One morning, Henley found him standing in the far corner of the barn, staring down at the hawk he'd brought in weeks ago. The bird was quiet now, its wing tucked close, no longer dragging like it had when he'd found it caught in the brambles. It didn't try to fly. It didn't need to. She's healing, Quinn said. But she's not in any rush. Henley stepped beside him, brushing straw from her skirt. Not everything rushes back into the sky. Sometimes it's enough just to stop falling. He turned to her. You ever feel like that? There was a time I didn't think I had a place to land, she said. But I've been wrong before. He leaned on the stall rail. I've been thinking about the spring. What about it? There's land northeast of us. Old Beaver Pond dried up. Would make good pasture if we cleared it. Henley studied his face. You want to expand? I want to build something that lasts, not just patch what's left behind." She let the silence stretch a moment, the way she always did when she was weighing her words. "I never thought I'd want more than just holding on," she said. "But I do. Not just for the girls. For me." Quinn met her eyes. "What would you build?" "A schoolhouse," she said. "Doesn't have to be big. Just warm enough. Room for 3 desks and a stove." Miriam started teaching May how to count in twos. "You'd teach?" Henley nodded. "I've still got my mother's primer, and I remember more than I thought I would." Quinn smiled, not out of amusement but something steadier, deeper. "I can put up walls," he said, "if you draw the plans." That night they sat shoulder to shoulder near the stove, a piece of charcoal in Henley's hand and a scrap of butcher paper smoothed across the table. She drew a square for the room, a rectangle for the stove, and added a narrow shelf by the window. "For the girls' readers," she said, "and anything else we find." Quinn studied the lines. "We'll need to cut lumber once the thaw comes." "I know where we can trade for boards," she said. "The man near Clear Fork has a sawmill." Ruth said he's fair. He nodded slowly, then turned toward her. "You've made this into more than I ever expected," he said. "Not just the land. Me." Henley didn't look away. "I didn't expect you either. But I'm glad you came." She reached for his hand, and he laced his fingers through hers. The next day, they hitched the sleigh and rode to Ruth's to trade eggs and salt for muslin and lamp oil. The roads were rutted, and the air sharp against their faces. The girls were bundled in wool and quilts, pressed between them, their cheeks red with cold. On the way back, Miriam leaned against Quinn and said, "Do you think we'll still be here next winter?" Henley turned in her seat. "Do you want to be?" Miriam blinked up at her. "I think I do." Quinn laid a hand gently on the reins. "Then we will." That spring they built the schoolhouse. It took most of April to dig and level the foundation, and another 3 weeks to raise the walls. Ruth's husband came with extra nails, and the neighbor from downriver lent a hand setting the stove. Henley painted the door with leftover barn red, her sleeves rolled and her hair tied back with a strip of calico. The girls pressed handprints into the frame before the paint dried. It opened in May, just after the last frost. 3 children from neighboring ranches came, and Henley taught them all with the same even voice she used when she read to May and Miriam. Quinn watched her from the field sometimes, leaning on his shovel as she pointed to the chalkboard, the sun catching the edge of her smile. By the time the wildflowers came to the ridge, the hawk had flown. Quinn found the empty perch one morning and stood there a long while, the barn door wide behind him. When he came in for supper, Henley had made stew with the last of the potatoes and a handful of early herbs from the garden. She handed him a bowl and said, "She's gone, isn't she?" He nodded. "Took off just after sunrise." Henley stirred her spoon. "She was ready." "So are we," he said. That night, after the girls were asleep, they stood on the porch watching the stars come in one by one like old friends. Henley leaned into him, her head resting just beneath his jaw. "I've never made it through a year without losing something before," she said. "You didn't lose this time," Quinn said. "You gained." "I did." She looked up at him. "I gained you." He kissed her, slow and certain. Inside, the fire burned low. Outside, the land breathed in the warmth of spring returning. And in the space between, where their hands were joined and their futures quiet but sure, everything settled into place. Years later, the schoolhouse still stood. The roof had been patched more than once, and the stove replaced with one less prone to smoking. Henley taught long after Miriam and May had grown and married, and Quinn built a second barn to house the extra stock they'd taken to raising. Neighbors knew their place by the red door on the schoolhouse and the way the wind always seemed to soften near the ridge. Henley and Quinn never left. They didn't need to. They had already arrived.